everyone. Welcome to 97.1 FM WPCX in Clinton, South Carolina, the campus of Presbyterian College. This is Community Climate. I'm your host, Brennan Carroll. This is my co-host, McHenry Brewer. And today we're joined by a special guest, Bob. I feel so terrible. Inglis, right?
Inglis, you got it right. Yes.
Okay. I was so worried.
But I
avoided
take Inglis too, if you want to go with that. That's the way they say it in Scotland. But Inglis is what we say here
Inglis.
in America.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, this has been, I've been promoting this for a while now, and I've given just little tidbits of information. What I've told them basically is that you are a former congressman, or Republican congressman,
Yes.
that has advocated for market-based solutions in terms of climate change and environmental policy.
Right.
Now, before we get into delve into it, I of course have to give the opinions disclaimer. I don't want to get fired. I don't want to get in trouble. So, this program is produced by students at Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. Views and opinions expressed on the station are those of student producers and do not necessarily reflect official views of the college. Thank you all for listening to this very this is also our last community climate of the school year.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
this is a very special one. So, so first I guess we should start with the beginning. What got you into politics in the first place?
Oh, wow. Good question. So, I grew up in the lower part of the state, Bluffton, South Carolina. And went to college, law school, practiced 2 years in Savannah, Georgia, and then wanted to come back to South Carolina, ended up in Greenville, practiced law, commercial real estate law, and then ran for office in 1992, having never run for Congress in 92, having never run for office before, and so, in a miracle, got elected. Then I served 6 years, challenged Senator Fritz Hollings in 1998. That didn't go so well. So I went back to practicing commercial real estate law, and then had the opportunity to run for the same seat again, South Carolina 4, in 2004, and served until 2010.
Okay, that's an interesting kind of career.
Yeah, 6 in, 6 out, 6 back. Yeah.
That's funny. So, were you you talk about like your environmental advocacy. Were you always kind of in that? I guess, was that always your opinion in terms of environmental policy, or did that kind of change over time? Or?
Yeah, definitely was a big change. My first 6 years, I said climate change was nonsense. I didn't know anything about it except that Al Gore was for it. and as much as he was for it, I was against it. Okay, pretty ignorant. That's the way it was my first 6 years in Congress. I did fit the district. It was Greenville, Spartanburg, Union, a little bit Lawrence County back then. Now that it's grown so much, it's just Greenville and Spartanburg, and portions of Greenville and Spartanburg aren't in the district. That's because the state's grown so much. So I fit the district for those 6 years. But then, in the time that I was out of Congress, that's when our kids were starting to grow up. So in 2004, when I was running again, that's when our son, the eldest of our 5 kids, who just turned 18, voting for the first time. And he came to me and said, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." His 4 sisters agreed, his mother agreed. New constituency, you need to respond to those people. They can change the locks on the doors to your house. And so that's step 1 of a 3-step metamorphosis for me. Step 2 is going to Antarctica, the science committee, and seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. And then step 3, another science committee trip and something of a spiritual awakening, which seems unlikely, right, on a godless science committee trip, because we all know that all scientists are godless. Well, apparently not, because this Aussie climate scientist who was showing me the glories of the Great Barrier Reef was clearly worshiping God in what he was showing me. I could see it in his eyes. It was written all over his face. It was in his excitement about what he was showing me. I knew he was worshiping God, not the corals. And so I knew we shared a worldview. St. Francis of Assisi is quoted as saying, preach the gospel at all times.
Yes.
If necessary, use words. And so that's what Scott Heron, this Aussie climate scientist who's now a very dear friend, was doing. And so later, without the snorkels in our mouths, a chance to talk, and he told me about conservation changes he was making in his life to love God and love people. And so I got right loving God and loving people. So I came home and introduced the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009. Probably not the best political timing to be talking about a carbon tax, even though it's paired with a reduction in payroll taxes, so there's no growth of government, and applied to Chinese imports and imports from any country that are coming without the same pricing. It still wasn't, even though it was those things, that's what's called revenue neutral and border adjustable, even though it was those things, it was a great recession. So let me find out. How old were you in October, like the fall of '08? You would have been, how old? How many years ago?
4.
Oh,
Four.
I would have been 2.
Two, yeah, okay, so, yeah, so you don't remember it, but your parents do remember.
Oh, yeah.
The Great Recession is a very scary time, so it's probably not the time for a guy named Inglis to be introducing a revenue-neutral carbon tax when people were worried about this month's mortgage payment, this month's paycheck. The house was underwater financially, where there was more was owed on the house than the house was worth. And so people were really worried, and basically what they were saying to me, I think, was, Inglis, looks like you're talking about something that's a slow-growing cancer, like, climate change. We're hemorrhaging over here. We need a tourniquet, so out of here. And so,
Yeah.
so at that point, a foundation came to me. I got tossed out in a Republican primary in June of 2010. And so that point, a foundation came to me and said, unusual zoo animal, Inglis, actual conservative, 93 American Conservative Union rating, 100% Christian Coalition, 100% National Right to Life, A with the NRA, 0 with the Americans for Democratic Action, liberal group, and 23 by some mistake with the AFL-CIO, the labor union. They said, actual conservative, will you speak and write for the proposition of climate action? And so that's what we're doing ever since. There's now this thing called RepublicEN.org. EN is for energy, entrepreneurship, the environment. We're conservatives who care about climate change, and what we're out to say to folks is, even if you don't care about climate change, you probably do want to get in on this energy revolution that's underway, and we probably do want to figure out a way to beat the Chinese to it, because either they're going to own the rest of this century or we are, and either they're going to be the ones that are calling the shots or we are, and so we think you end up in the same place, whether you're interested in climate or whether you're just interested in the energy revolution that's underway.
I like that's a good way to look at it. I didn't think about that before.
Yeah.
So, what are your biggest? I mean, I know probably I guess the more obvious challenges are just on our side of the aisle, so to speak.
Yeah.
It is kind of hard to talk about climate change because you also when people think of climate change activists, they also think of people that throw spaghetti on
Right.
on art,
Yeah.
or just I guess more radical things so how do you combat that? How do you
It really is a challenge because there's a gear shift here. It used to be if you wanted to be an environmentalist, basically it was no, don't, stop, don't build that, don't do that, no, stop. Now, if you're really into the environment, it's like this: build it and build it fast. More generation facilities, make more electricity, more transmission lines, get it to places where it's needed. Because we're in this race to basically electrify everything, to include warfighting. Warfighting is now a lot about drones. That's really just a battery and some propellers and some munitions and a computer. And that's really essentially what an EV is, and what all kinds of energy uses that we need for AI and things are driving this move toward. We need more of it. And so if you really care about the environment at this point, it's changing from no, don't stop into, hey, build this stuff. And so what we hope at RepublicEN.org is conservatives can hear that and realize, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's what we're about. We want to create things in free enterprise. We want to make it so we create wealth, create jobs, do more, and innovate. And so we think it's a natural message for conservatives.
Yeah.
It's also acceptable to a lot of people left of center is to figure out a way to get that innovation going.
Hmm.
But there are some people that, what I like to say is they play down at the 10-yard lines. On my side of the field, Republican side of the field, there's some people down there at the 10-yard line. And then on the left, there's surely people at the 10-yard line playing from the 10-yard line to the goalpost, where they're talking about basically walking and eating bugs, repenting to the capitalistic system. We gotta repent of all of this stuff. We gotta do with less. We don't think that's what it is. We think life is really more between the 40-yard lines, where there's solutions available that actually will work. But I acknowledge that what our tune right now at RepublicEN.org is not the tune on Republican radio. The tune on Republican radio is something about hoax and something about how we're going to double down on burning rocks and stuff out of the ground. But I have this confidence. Eventually, bad ideas and shaky ideologies are overcome by economic realities. And the economic reality is we're in a race, whether we know it or not, with the Chinese to electrify everything. And we'll either enter that race and win it with small modular reactors, for example, nuclear reactors that are small and interchangeable, better batteries, better solar, better wind efficiency, or we'll try to double down on burning rocks and burning stuff out of the ground and be sort of like the people who objected to Henry Ford doing the Model T because they were in the horse business. Well, I like horses fine. We've got 3 of them at our farmette. My wife loves especially, but I'm glad that Henry Ford created a car, and I'm glad that there are going to be new cars that don't dump into the trash dump of the sky. It'd be pretty great.
I think that's. Oh, is that? Oh, that's you. Okay. Okay, that's good. Sorry. Sometimes I get calls like if they're urgent enough. Sometimes I get dead air. My dad listens to the show and he'll call me. He's like, "Hey,
good.
I can't hear you."
Okay.
So
That's great to have that coaching from home. That's terrific.
I had one small question.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the future of cars? Do you think ultimately we're heading towards all electric vehicles?
I think so, based on the Chinese competition. China now has this car company. It used to be a battery company called BYD. They have a car that can go 300 miles on a 5-minute charge.
Really?
5-minute charge, that's it.
That's way ahead of where we have those.
Yeah, and so Ford Motor Company right now is betting the farm on creating one, meeting that competition. So Ford says they've got to get an electric car that can do that, 5-minute charge, 300 miles, and they got to sell it around $30,000. They got to get the price down to about 30.
So that it can be available for the common person.
Yeah, because the challenge for them is that BYD is, China's now the largest car market in the world and the largest car producing country in the world.
Yeah.
50% of their new car sales are EVs. BYD is now in double-digit market share in Europe and rising fast. And they can sell a car in Latin America that's like in the $20,000 range. And so Ford is sort of catatonic about this. They realize that, oh my gosh, we're a worldwide company. We need to sell cars worldwide. BYD is going to take over the car world, the car market in the whole world, unless they meet the competition. And so that's where, again, economic realities overcome shaky thoughts or ideologies, and so it's, but it can be exciting. The great thing about that is, this fall I was in New York City and I was walking down the street, just all kinds of fumes coming at me, from these buses and trucks and cars.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, my 7 grandchildren are going to someday say, can you believe that Mimi and Papa used to breathe that stuff? They used to breathe that stuff. It's like me saying to my grandmother, who grew up in South Georgia, can you believe that Nanny used to ride in a carriage at the south end of a northbound horse?
Yeah.
And so I
think
think
it'll become the new normal.
Yeah, I think it'll be like, wow, why didn't we do this sooner? But, and notice this, it's not because of the $7,500 car credit has gone away. The Trump administration has eliminated that. Ford Motor Company, no matter, is going for this EV thing, because they say it doesn't, they sell cars in America, but they sell cars around the world.
Oh, yeah.
And they've got to compete around the world. And so they sort of wish that the $7,500 credit were still here, but they're in a competition in the whole world. And so that's, again, where the economic realities overcome any kind of ideology that may turn out to be temporarily popular, but then later is proved to be, well, it's so like saying to Henry Ford when he invented the car, which was really a dangerous thing. I mean, it's basically a Molotov cocktail, I mean, it's gasoline and it set fields on fire, they backfired, and the horses reared up and people fell off and died. Their tires blew out, people died in these cars, and so, but, and there were people that were objecting. They were saying, the horse buggy whip manufacturers were saying, listen, you got to protect us, our business. Well, thank goodness we didn't. We said, oh, well, Henry, keep making the car better. In other words, get better wheels or get rid of tires. The Michelin's helped us with that. We're glad to have Michelin Tire Corporation in South Carolina. And so they helped with the tires. And then, the car got better and better. And Henry Ford also figured out how to get the price of it down through mass manufacturing, get the price down so that the average person, as you said, McHenry, could afford it.
Right.
That's when things took off.
Right.
And so now Bill Ford, who runs the company, is out to do that with EVs.
Wow.
So it's pretty exciting time, really, if you think about it. It's just, but we know that there's been some pushback against it, because anytime there's change, there's pushback.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
What about planes and air travel? Do you think is there any? I don't even know. Is that even possible to be electric? Is that?
There's some people think so. In fact, I was just with our
It seems
son.
like that would be a lot harder for a jet engine to be electric, but
Seems to me too.
Yeah.
But we're just visiting our son in Burlington, Vermont, where he's an emergency room doctor and his wife and two little girls. And there's actually a company there that's making an electric airplane.
Really?
Maybe it'll work. But
We'll know if it doesn't.
what other people are talking about is, interestingly enough, when I mentioned New York City Climate Week, it was at that event that I'm talking about, when I was walking down that street that time, that there was DHL was doing an event, the delivery company, and they were talking about how they are committed to getting to sustainable aviation fuel by 2035. And they say the reason is that, America's important to them. It's a big market, but they say there are other big markets too, and in order to operate in those, they're going to have to get their emissions down. And so they're out to do it. Of course, what we're also finding out right now, as we're talking on April the 23rd, 2026, is that, when the Straits of Hormuz gets closed off, and the price of gas does what it does, we have enough oil here in America to supply our needs, but the thing is, it's a world market in oil and petroleum. So when that 20% is cut off, the price rises worldwide, which could plunge the whole world into a recession.
Yeah.
And so we really are dependent on that region of the world, even though we're not literally dependent. We've got our own, but the price, we're dependent on them. I mean, it depends on whether that 20% is actually flowing or not. If it's not flowing, we in this world are in trouble with prices, right? And so what I want to be able to do, and this comes from my 5 trips to Iraq and 4 trips to Afghanistan when I was in Congress during that series of wars, is I want to be able to say to the Middle East, see if you can drink that stuff. We just don't need you like we used to. Here's a copy of our Constitution in your language. You might want to study it, but you won't be seeing us anymore. Toodaloo.
Yeah.
And Vladimir Putin, your economy just went to nothing, because you got nothing to sell now. because we've got small modular reactors, we've got better solar, we've got better batteries, we're operating without you. Toodaloo. And that's American national security, when you can say, you know what, we're just not dependent on a region of the world, not literally dependent on their oil, right? Because we've got our own, but the price is determined by them.
That would
But-
be the day.
Yeah, and so then we can say, you know, hey, we just don't need you like we used to. And that's, I mean, that's a pretty exciting consequence of
Really
this
is,
innovation, if we could get the innovation going. But it's back to that thing about if you're into the environment today, what you need to be saying is, yeah, build it fast. We got to get these small modular reactors up and going. We got to figure out how to do that. We got to get the transmission lines so that they can get from the place where we can produce the power to where it's needed. That means permitting reform. That means rethinking some environmental laws that have been stucking around for a long time that environmental groups have used to do the no, don't, stop thing. But no, we need to build it. We need those transmission lines. We got to get the power to where it needs to be. And so it's a different world, and we got to sort of think fresh about where we are.
I agree with you, especially in terms of nuclear energy. Like that was new to me. And maybe that is an outdated view, kind of generally. When you think of environmentalists, you think of like, oh, they're anti-nuclear energy and stuff like that. But I think a lot of, well, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna say a lot because that would be speculation. But I think I've heard some people advocate for nuclear energy, and I think that would be a really good addition, you know, for energy independence, like you said. Even if you don't buy into the kind of more progressive environmental, I guess, reasoning.
Yeah, and you see, it's changing, thankfully, on left to center. It is changing some about nuclear. So, for example, I was once invited by the Sierra Club to come to Rochester, New York, and we said, we don't do Sierra Clubs at RepublicEN.org. Somebody else can talk to Sierra Clubs better than we can. But if you get the Chamber of Commerce to go sponsor it, maybe I'll come. So they got the Chamber of Commerce. So I get there. There are 300 people. Nobody from the Chamber of Commerce. they're all Sierra Club people, and so they're loving on me, you know, because a Republican who's sort of saying that his party needs to change. Well, they're loving that. They're loving it. They're clapping. They're enjoying it. And then the question comes about nuclear power. And so I said, oh no, my polling number is about to decline dramatically here and now. And so I told him what I've just said here, build them fast. About a third of the crowd started clapping. Those are the ones with the new talking points. The 2/3 were stuck in the 1970s
With Chernobyl.
with all those old talking points.
Yeah.
But the 1/3 that were up to date, understanding that, no, people like Jim Hansen, you know, the famous hockey stick guy, Bill Gates, they're real into building nuclear. And so there's an opportunity, actually a little bit left to center, with people that are with us on building nuclear power plants. In fact, we did a webinar at RepublicEN.org showing the film Nuclear Now. It's a guy named Oliver Stone, Hollywood liberal. I don't know him, but he's a Hollywood liberal guy. So it did this film called Nuclear Now, and it basically says, it's pretty preachy, but I like the sermon. So, but anyway, it's like he says, we scared ourselves back in the 70s. There's no reason to be scared. We need to build these things. That's the message of this film, Nuclear Now. So it's not at all controversial, right of center. Left of center, the film's sort of controversial. But hopefully it's going to help people to see, hey, this is no right-winger doing this film. This is a Hollywood liberal doing this film that says, build them fast, because they don't emit anything, you know. And there's far less radioactivity around a nuclear power plant than there is in a coal-fired electricity plant. That stuff emits stuff, and so really it's a pretty safe way to make electricity, as we know here in South Carolina, thankfully, with, you know, kiwi, for example. And
It is so surprising that more people on the left side of the spectrum are against nuclear energy, because being that it is a cleaner, being that it's so clean, it is sort of surprising they're like more against it. I would think that be a pro-climate. I think of it as being a pro-climate thing.
Oh, it is. It's definitely pro-climate.
So,
And that's
yeah.
what I'm saying. I think it's just people stuck in the old talking
Yeah,
points.
yeah.
It's, but it happens. You get sort of used to saying things,
Yeah.
and then you realize, oops, that's not just so true anymore.
Yeah.
And then you need to change.
Mhm.
Now, I keep on talking about small modular reactors because let me acknowledge somebody listening might say, well, Inglis, listen, we got a $9 billion, billion with a B, hole in the ground in Jenkinville, South Carolina. A failed nuclear power plant, one that it was under construction and then kaput. The reason it went kaput is the price of natural gas dropped. And so compared to a natural gas plant, it was more expensive to be pursuing that nuclear power plant. But that was a gargantuan, specially designed. I wish it had worked, because if it had, we would be like 75% clean energy in South Carolina. It would have been awesome. But because of the cost overruns, it stopped. One continued in Georgia, the Vogtle plant. It was its twin, the twin to the Jenkinville plant. It continued, and the reason is, as I understand it, they had more people to spread the cost out in Georgia because there are more people in Georgia, and so you could spread. McHenry, you're from Atlanta, so yes, they could spread it over you, and a lot of people, and that's why they could continue Vogtle, whereas ours in Jenkinville couldn't be continued. But hopefully it's going to get going again. Is maybe if we could just learn from the Vogtle about how whatever the cost overruns and try to avoid them if we start it up again. That's the problem though with especially designed. If you could get it down to sort of a modular system where you make small ones that can be hooked together and sort of come off an assembly line, so they're not specially designed, everyone being specially designed. That's where you run into a lot of cost, special design stuff.
Right. So mass production would, we did talk about this previously, about how mass production would lead to lower costs. Of course, different kind of topic, but no, I like that. I like that, the modular. What is like the biggest challenge with kind of getting these nuclear plants? Because on the right side, because South Carolina is a red state, as I understand it, a pretty like majority red. So how come we don't see more nuclear projects and things like that?
Well, there's some breakthroughs that are needed in the design of the small modular reactors, and that's the thing. We really do need to figure that out. So it's not like there are. I think Apple and Microsoft have announced some deals with a company that may be able to actually make small modular reactors, but that's just a upfront deal. It's not happening just yet. So probably what we need is a real focus on it with some expenditures by the federal government, like we do with the space program. To say, listen, we're going to invest in this. We're going to make it work. I'd be in favor of that if I were still in Congress. We're in deficit and we've got a terrible debt, but some things are, even when you're in debt, you go ahead with investments, and one of them would be figuring out this nuclear thing and how to get these small modular reactors to work. So there's some technical barriers still, I guess is what I'm telling you.
Okay. Real quick, before we continue, I have to do our station ID again.
Yes.
So, just real quick, just a reminder, guys, or if you're just joining us, you're listening to 97.1 FM WPCX in Clinton, South Carolina, the campus of Presbyterian College. This is still, we haven't stopped yet. This is current community climate. Sorry, current climate's my show on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
So this is Community Climate. I'm your host, Brennan Carroll. This is my co-host, McHenry Brewer. This is our special guest, Executive Director of RepublicEN, Bob Inglis, and we're just discussing climate change, I guess. Well,
Yeah.
that's the broad topic. So.
And this energy revolution, right?
Yes.
Because there was a time when we lit our houses, our huts by whale oil. We actually hunted whales, got the blubber, turned it into oil.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it was like I was away. The people had lights. It's from whale oil.
The blubber of whales.
Yeah, and then came. We figured out that hey, this coal stuff's pretty good. And then we figured out hey, this petroleum stuff's even better because then you know, in World War II, the switch from shoveling coal onto ships to make steam and to make the thing go to petroleum, big deal. You know, it was like a real improvement about how to get around on the ocean. And so, whale oil to coal to petroleum, and now to this electrification of everything is where we're pretty clearly headed. You know, we need it because of all the AI data centers that need an awful lot of power. We can either, you know, make that by burning a bunch of stuff and fouling the air, or we can get it by better means. Hopefully we're going to get it by better means, better, cleaner, cheaper, and renewable.
So, well, what are your thoughts on AI in general? Like, would you consider it to be like a net positive, net negative, or?
I assume it's going to be positive. It's going to create a lot of disturbance in the whole way we operate. I think. I mean, there are a lot of jobs I think that'll be at risk. But so will there be with self-driving cars and self-driving trucks. You know, so there's a lot of change that's coming. That's why it's good that you're here at PC. You know, being flexible in your education so that you're able to sort of roll with the punches, because I think you gotta the one constant you can count on is change, and so the best way to be prepared for that is to be educated at a place like PC, you know, and ready to roll with it. So I think AI is a reality that we're going to have in our lives, and it's going to change a lot of things about the way that we operate. What do y'all think? What do you think about AI?
Well, so it's tricky. So with AI, I've been very concerned, very critical throughout my time on the show and everything about AI, but not mostly in terms of data collection, and then also with the intelligence community and things like that. Privacy has been a big concern of mine. But in terms of like the more technical aspects of it, like I use Claude AI a lot. It does really good stuff with coding and things like that. It can teach you things. It can like format emails and things like that. I think I think it's pretty good. I think it's a really good tool.
Yeah.
My only concern in terms of that is just I hope it doesn't replace like actual like people learning things, and because if you're too reliant on it, and my dad is into marketing and things like that, and one of the problems that we have with clients and stuff is that they think they can do it on their own because they're using AI to generate the images and to create the schedules and everything else, and there's a certain part where you just kind of need that human touch, but sometimes it's not even the fact that AI is replacing us in quality. It's just that there's like a perceived like, oh, I can just use AI, and people kind of don't see the hidden value there is to a human. But I think the advancement of AI generally, I think it's a good thing. I think it can be a good thing. I think it can be used for good.
Yeah. Here's hoping. In the meanwhile, it is going to create a lot of disruption. I'm certain of that, and I'm also certain we need a lot more electricity because it is a hog of electricity, and so that's why we got to figure out a way to generate a lot more. And really, if you care about the environment, as I was saying earlier, it's build it fast. Get the transmission lines going. Get permitting reform done. Let's do this. And
which is hard to get going. I'm sure bureaucracy and things like that.
Yeah, and there, it is. We describe ourselves as part of the eco-right. We're a balance to the environmental left.
I've been trying to find a name for that. Okay, that's good. That's good.
Because hundreds of millions of dollars are spent every year, literally hundreds of millions teeny bit of money spent on the eco-right. And so it's just sort of natural that the messaging is all left-of-center messaging when it comes to environmental things and climate change. Whereas if we could expand the eco-right, then people would hear it in their own language about, well, what we're going to do is we're going to create more wealth here. We're going to create jobs. We're not going to do with less. We're going to actually have more energy, more mobility, more freedom. It's just going to be faster, better, cleaner, and cheaper. And it can be if we innovate through the free enterprise system. And that's the only force that can innovate at speed and scale in order to meet this challenge. And so when you, the left-of-center messaging really doesn't work with right-of-center audiences. And so that's why what we live to do at RepublicEN.org is help people hear it in the language of conservatism.
I like that.
About basically the free enterprise system can do amazing things if you just really start with accountability and say, listen, we're going to bring accountability for emissions. And once you do that, innovation can happen. Because what I've found out on the science committee, is there are all kinds of ways to make electricity. You can make tidal energy, for example. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. Happens all the time on the South Carolina coast. The three of us could go into business making tidal energy. Problem. We can't compete with natural gas because they get away with dumping into the trash dump of the sky without paying any tipping fee for the space they're taking up there. You go to here in Brennan, there's a city dump or there's a county dump. We're in Lawrence County, right? Yeah. Lawrence County has a dump. If the three of us were in a trash hauling business, they'd weigh our trucks on the way into the dump. We'd pay a tipping fee based on the weight of the stuff, of the trash in our trucks. And that makes sense, right? Everybody agrees with that. It's a user fee. As long as we're in business doing that, we back that cost up to our customers. And that's appropriate because they're the people filling up the trash dump, right? And so what happens is if the three of us want to go in this tidal energy business, well, we can do it. It's possible. Problem is, it's just cheaper to make electricity by burning natural gas. But that's because when they burn the natural gas, they dump into the trash dump of the sky without any accountability. There's no tipping fee. So you put that tipping fee on, that's a carbon tax. Then what happens is tidal energy might be possible economically. Up until it's not possible because if you got a competitor that gets away with some of its cost, socializing it to the society, then you can't compete. Now, because we're conservatives, if we're going to do this carbon tax, we say we want to reduce some other tax because we don't want any growth of government. So you do it together, lockstep. So if you do this carbon tax, then cut my taxes somewhere else. The tax that I'd cut is the FICA tax. That's the payroll tax. When you there's somebody working in the McDonald's near here, second or third job for her, she's paying 12.4% payroll tax at that job right now. 6.2 her that she sees on her paycheck in the FICA box, FICA box. That's 6.2 her, 6.2% McDonald's Corporation. Total of 12.4%. Reduce that tax. Put on the carbon tax. The congressional budget says the bottom 70% of Americans end up better off by switching what you tax off income on pollution. But here's the kicker. If you have that in place, you can apply the tax to Chinese imports in a way that's consistent with existing World Trade Organization rules. It wouldn't be a new trade war. It's under existing rules. You can do this. You can say, hey, we're paying a carbon tax here. Stuff coming in, you're going to pay it. Unless you have the same thing back home. That would make it so the Chinese would have every reason to do the same thing. And so then you'd have, because if you're doing business anywhere in the world, you're doing business with America and China, you'd have the whole world following. And everybody paying this tipping fee into the trash dump of the sky. then innovation happens. We're in the tidal energy business because now natural gas we're competing with them on a level playing field. They're not getting away with offloading some of their costs. Now we're level, and we're maybe able to do this tidal energy thing, or many other ways to make electricity. Because then you fix the economics. And what we think, at RepublicEN.org, we think what we have here is a problem of economics, has an environmental consequence. Fix the economics. And that should be the strong suit of conservative, right of center people.
I feel like it would be much more popular with conservatives if you make it a problem about the economy instead of a problem about, even if it also is a problem about the environment, if you pitch it as an economy issue.
Right, because that's what, we think that what happens is conservatives have an undeserved inferiority complex when it comes to energy and climate. Apparently we just think we're no good. So we change the subject. We shrink in science denial, or we just want to change the subject. So like, McHenry, you keep on talking to me about this marathon you want me to run in with you. Well, I don't want to run a marathon. You ever stood at a finish line of a marathon? I mean, the people look like they're dying. I don't want to do it. And so if you kept on talking to me about that, I'd change the subject, right? And so when conservatives hear the topic of climate come up, they think, oh, not my topic. It's like marathon running. I'm not good at that. Let's change the subject.
Yeah.
But we think, no, conservatives are the kid in class with the answer. Raise your hand.
Yeah.
Fix economics. And watch the free enterprise system deliver innovation faster than government regulations or fickle tax incentives could ever imagine. It's like rock solid conservatism. You won't know this guy that I'm about to reference, but there's a guy in the 1980s, Phil Donahue. This is basically a white guy doing an Oprah Winfrey show.
Yeah.
From Chicago also. And he used to have Dr. Milton Friedman, who was Reagan's economics advisor, on, and they debate. And so Phil asked Dr. Friedman in a clip that we got on our website, RepublicEN.org, he says, what do you do about pollution then, Dr. Friedman, if you don't want to regulate it? Friedman says, you tax it. You tax pollution. And then he goes on to explain how you can't let two people dump on a third party. And Phil challenged him, does the government ever? He says, yeah. Dr. Friedman says, yes, the government has to step in and say those two people can't dump on these other people. They've got to be held accountable for those, whatever costs they're offloading to somebody else. And if you've had Econ 101, it's what, is that what you call it here at PC, Econ 101, or is it Econ 1 or something? I don't know, whatever.
I think it would be 101, right?
There's microeconomics and macroeconomics.
Yeah. So if you have one of those, it's they have what it is it's called internalizing negative externalities. My ad guy laughs every time I say that. He says, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so what it is just accountability for the side effects of these costs that Dr. Friedman is talking about that are being dumped on other people. He says you got to bring accountability for that, because what he was really big into is that a product needs to bear all of its cost into the marketplace so that the market can judge it. Because if, like I was saying earlier about natural gas, it gets away with dumping in the trash dump of the sky without any accountability. So that cost that it's causing to society, both in, not just in climate with the CO2, but in the small particulates that come out that cause asthma cases, that cause hospitalizations, they're not accountable for that. So what Dr. Friedman would say if he were still alive is you got to bring that accountability to that natural gas so that then the three of us that were thinking about forming this tidal energy company can now be in business. Because we're not in business until they're made accountable. We got no hope in our business until they're brought to account. Because then the free enterprise system can say, oh, we see your true cost. They're pretty high, natural gas. Maybe we'd like to check into this tidal energy company. And so we level the playing field is what we talk about. And we're pretty bold about saying, eliminate all the subsidies for all the fuels. No more subsidies. Including the big, and by the way, that usually makes people, wind and solar, nervous, but actually what they say is, hey, if you get rid of the biggest subsidy of them all, which is being able to dump into the trash dump of the sky without any accountability, they would say, we don't need any subsidies. You know, I once said to the Wind Energy Association, they invited me to come speak, and I said, you know, I'm going to be the porcupine at the balloon rally because I'm going to come there and I'm going to say, eliminate your subsidy. And they said, yeah, but you're for that carbon tax that's paired with a reduction in payroll tax, and so it's revenue neutral and applied to imports. And I said, yes, that's right. And they said, well, come ahead then, because if you do that, we don't need the production tax credit that we've currently got. We will beat coal better than we're beating it now. So come ahead. Just level the playing field, which, again, for conservatives, that's like really, that's sort of basic stuff. It's just a level playing field. We like that, I think.
So,
Give me an amen, I'll stop preaching.
I gotta ask you, what do you think about wind turbines?
I like them fine because I'm into sailing.
Okay.
And to me, they make me think of sailing. And I know that President Trump hates them because he thinks they mar his golf course view. I don't know. But so to some extent, it's aesthetics, right? And what your preferences are. We used to make a lot of them in the district that I represent, 4th District, South Carolina. General Electric was making a lot of those in my time in Congress at the Garlington Road facility. A lot of they moved the Enron business to Greenville to build those wind turbines. So that's another reason I was for them. But you know, I think it's a pretty great way to make electricity. You know, if you're talking at the coast, you can put them over the horizon enough so that when you're walking the beach, you won't actually see them if you don't like them. But I look out, if I see them, I think of the sailboat, so I sort of like it. But other people don't like it, and there are a lot of farmers in Iowa who like it fine,
Yeah.
because Iowa has a lot of wind, and they can keep on farming underneath those things, and so it's like an additional source of income for them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's keeping the farm going,
Yeah.
Okay.
is being able to get a check from the people that have the wind turbines out there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, some people don't like the look of solar. I think solar reminds me of so like a pond or ocean or something. We had some pretty big things here in South Carolina. You know, down in Calhoun County, there's some pretty big solar farms. You don't really notice them until you get off of said I-26 and you get out in the country a little bit, and you realize, golly, there's some big solar farms over here making a lot of electricity. So a little house down in the lower part of the state in Bluffton, South Carolina, that a family place of ours, I got 8 solar panels, and I just found out today we're 57% solar today at that house, which is really pretty exciting. Of course, nobody's there, so that's why we're covering 57%.
Yeah.
Out of little teeny system, eight solar panels. So pretty fun.
Awesome.
And it's also mighty cheap because there are no input costs. You know, once you get it up, you know, it costs money to put it up. But then from there on, it's like the sun's shining. So I do want to clean the pollen off of them
Oh,
when
yeah.
I get down there next, so that they get
Yeah.
100% efficiency.
So I guess my last question for you is, well, I have 2 questions, but the second one's like really short. So, but the first question I had for you is, so how do you balance like kind of like building all this infrastructure and stuff like that while also kind of preserving like preserving nature, really, I guess? Because I know that's also a big concern in terms of conservation and things like that. So I guess like what would be a good balance, do you think?
Yeah, balance is the key, right? And
Yeah.
so if we're building these transmission lines, well, if it comes over my house, of course, I'm not very excited about it. You know, hopefully it won't come over your house either. But there are ways to build them so they're not ugly. But there are going to be there are trade-offs in life, and I
Yeah.
think that's what we just have to acknowledge, is that there's no perfect, it's a fallen world, and it's marred by sin and needs redemption and grace, and the reality is that there's just some trade-offs. So one time I was in Utah, for example, one of our target states are Florida, Georgia, Carolinas, Indiana, Utah, and Iowa. I was in Utah one time, and there's a gal who's helping us with some things we were doing out there, and we were talking about copper mining, and she sort of shamefully admitted that her husband works for Rio Tinto, which is a huge mining company.
Oh.
To which I said to her, "Oh no, really, that's not anything to feel guilty about, because if we need copper, and that means some mountains, basically you got to dig them out and dig the copper out. Now hopefully you can try to, cover them with grass or something, or do something to make it look better, and hopefully you can keep the trailings out of the stream and the river, so it's not killing everything. But somebody's got to dig that copper, because we need copper. If we're talking about these transmission lines, you need a lot of copper.
Yeah.
If we're talking about EVs, you need a lot of copper. And so it's trade-offs. So the thing you got to do is just we can't just say to ourselves, we're just going to sweat or shiver in the dark depending on the season. I mean, that's not acceptable, right? We got to figure out some way to, yes, power our lives, get the stuff we need, but then take care as to be as careful with it as possible, so we're not fouling the nest. We don't want to poop the nest, basically. Just the nest that we live in. Don't poop in the nest, and don't mess that up. You got to rearrange some things. You got to build a transmission line. Hopefully you can plant some, dogwoods under there. Dogwoods don't grow tall, so they don't get up into the transmission line, right? And so you don't want to plant loblolly trees, pine trees, because they will get up into the transmission line, but plant other trees. Have solar farms underneath those power lines so that you're using that space. I mean, there are a lot of smart things we can do if the economics are right. And it really does come down to economics, because if you're building this huge transmission line, there's a lot of clearing that goes on. Why not use all that space for solar panels all underneath there, and then plant pollinator plants underneath and around the solar field, so that now you're feeding the monarch butterflies as they fly through in their migration. In other words, you can do these things and also be caring for God's creation, because it is pretty awesome to have monarch butterflies do what they do, and we want to feed them with milkweed, and you can do that underneath and around the solar panels. And so it doesn't have to be all ugly. It can be, you can make it work. It's just like here at PC, there's some really attractive buildings that have been built, and I'm sure it used to be a field of grass or something. But there's some really attractive buildings that are made to fit in, but in the meantime, it probably was a big mess, with a lot of red clay around and a lot of stuff torn up and trees chopped down. But now there are new trees growing, I mean, you gotta break some eggs to make mayonnaise, right? That's what they say. So sometimes you
Or an
gotta break.
omelet or whatever.
Yeah. That's even better, I think.
Yeah.
Because who knew that mayonnaise has eggs in it?
I didn't even know that.
It
actually.
does,
Yeah.
but anyway, so. Anyway, what was your other question? You had a
Yeah.
short question. You said.
So my other question is, so we do know you've had a political past.
Yeah.
Now we were just wondering if is running for another position any time in the future? Is that a possibility? Like, would you be, I guess, open to that, or are you just kind of done with politics in general?
Well, I do miss it. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. The best thing about Congress is mission and purpose. It's full of mission and purpose. Every day is. But the good thing about what I'm doing now at RepublicEN.org is it's also filled with mission and purpose. So this idea of bringing accountability for missions is the best idea I came across when I was in Congress. What mine alone, it's the idea of most economists in the world. That sounds like an overstatement, but really it's literally true. And so I get to do that now, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to. It's the most you can hope for out of a career, is mission and purpose and a sense of fulfillment. So if we get this done, I'm be very happy with that. I guess I'll never say never about running for office again, but I want to get done what I'm doing right now, and so if we can get it done real quickly, I'm not old enough yet to run for president. I'm only 66, so you got to be 80 to be president.
Seems
So
like it, right?
so maybe maybe if I grow up, I could run for president, but. I do hope that becomes a real joke. In other words, it's not appropriate. Really, we need somebody more your age, I think, to be president rather than me at 80. So, yeah. But anyway, so we'll see. But mostly, I just want to get done what I'm trying to do now.
Awesome.
And you run for Congress. You can do that, at age 25.
Yeah.
And you can run for the
Long ways to
Senate at
go.
age 30. And you can run for president at 35. You don't have to wait until you're 80.
I'm counting the days.
Yeah. So.
But it was great talking with you. It was good meeting you and everything. Just a reminder, guys, this has been 97.1 FM WPCX in Clinton, South Carolina, the campus of Presbyterian College. This has been Community Climate, the last of the school year. We won't see you guys until the fall semester, like probably September, because we don't kick off the first month of school. So. I've been Brennan Carroll, your host. This has been my co-host, McHenry Brewer. This has been our special guest, Bob Inglis. Be sure to check. What's your website?
RepublicEN.org. EN is for
Yes.
Energy, Entrepreneurship, the Environment. So RepublicEN.org.
Yes. Be sure to check out his website, and be sure to come over to BlueTube PC. I believe that's the username on our YouTube channel. Be sure to go over there, check out our recordings. This should be out by 6, I believe. This recording right here should be out by 6. We had the Paul Dance interview up. It was up at 12 today because of some delays. But I'm sorry. I hate saying goodbye. This is the last one.
Yeah,
it's
that's
the last
tough.
one.
That's hard.
Oh yeah. Okay. Last thing. I actually do have to do this. So every show we have to do 2 opinions disclaimers, one at the beginning and one at the end.
Yes.
So this program is produced by students at Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. Views and opinions expressed on this station are those of student producers and do not necessarily reflect official views of the college. Thank you all for the final time for listening to WPCX. I will see you all next school year.